So yeah, basically I wanted to, for whatever reason during quarantine, I've just been thinking nonstop about basketball, obviously. And one of the things that I've been thinking about a ton is just timeouts. And with all this dead time, I've just been thinking about all the different ways that a coach can, get value out of timeouts, or, just the different ways that programs use their timeouts, or, even just like the discussion of like how you want your team to man, to stand during a timeout, or who do you want where, who do you want doing what on the staff? There's so much that goes into it. So feel free to, take this conversation whichever direction you'd like. One thing that I just wanted to mention to, maybe younger coaches or coaches that are wanting to get into the game, that, the timeout situations are different at different levels. And not only that, but men's and women's, the game is different. So for me, I'm coaching Division III women's basketball. We have 330s and a 60 that can be used at any point, and they carry over from half to half. We have media timeouts. So we have one media timeout each period at the first dead ball, or, below the 5-minute mark. The other thing that's a little bit unique about women's Division III compared to men's is advancing the basketball at the end of games.
God, that you guys have that now.
Yeah, and I think it's one thing that I think is awesome about the women's game is that we're playing similar to like the pro levels, NBA and WNBA. We can advance the ball, within the last minute of a game. If you call a timeout and haven't advanced the basketball with a dribble or pass or anything like that, as long as you call a timeout and let the referees know that you want to advance the basketball, you can advance the basketball. The one thing that I noticed on here when I was looking it up just to see all the rules about it, it says on here that you're going to advance it to the scorers table side. But what I've noticed in our games is they always ask us which side we want to advance it to.
Really?
So, yes, I don't know if that's just our conference, or I don't know how that works. I'd have to look further into that. But yeah, what's your view on the advancing the basketball? Do you wish that you guys were able to do it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it just gives, I don't know. I mean, like you said, it's close to the league stuff. I think it gives offense, a little bit more of an advantage and whatnot. But I think coaching wise, it's a fun opportunity because you get to put to work things that you've always like had instilled in your team, like plays and sets and ATO, sideline out of bounds, and you don't get a ton of opportunities to use those without advancing the ball. Like you see all the best ATOs, like there's a reason we look at ATOs from the NBA because they have so many of them. They run so many of them. That situation's there so often. We don't get those opportunities very often, but I think it would be fun. I think I don't see who wouldn't enjoy that other than maybe the team that's getting hurt by it, of course. But like overall, you got to think that men's college basketball would like that change. So I'm with you. And then, yeah, I would think the same thing. Like they were asking you what side you wanted on. I'd like that. You get to pick what side, setting it up. I don't know how that works though. I don't know in most leagues too, like what they do. I don't even know in the pros if the ball is out of bounds. Did they ask them what side they wanted on?
I don't know. To be honest, maybe I read the rule wrong. Maybe you can pick in any league. Maybe I just read the information incorrectly. But I know based off of our last couple of years, they've asked us which side we want to advance it to, which I think also makes a difference.
Yeah, because like a big thing in men's college basketball forever, even like when we're playing and before us and stuff, is like having a play to where you can just throw the ball to half court and get it on that sideline that you want it on. So then you can call your ATO out of bounds play. So
yeah, which is crazy because that's such a huge accomplishment just to get that pass and catch.
Exactly. It's like the amount of times I think that I've even been a player or a coach and had that work is I can count on one hand for sure. It's so tough.
So at Chaminade right now, when you guys call a timeout, and let's say it's a full timeout, what does the staff do?
Yeah. So like you started this off with, the biggest thing is the differences between levels because we play the Maui Invitational and then we play our normal games. There is a huge difference in the timeouts of the Maui Invitational, TV timeouts, and Division II timeouts. And then I played D3, And I know, like even in the Sky conference, they might have switched it this year, but the year before they still didn't have medias. I don't think they had them this year either. They didn't. So D3, I think it's conferences get to pick.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay. So that's D3. Of course, D2 has medias, but then D1 has TV timeouts, which are way longer.
So much longer.
So much longer. Yeah, you've been in like at Oregon and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's so we actually going into Maui have to like talk with our guys about how we're going to do timeouts, which usually it's like they know how we're going to do our normal timeouts D2 games, but we actually have to make that a point of emphasis and talk about it before our last practice headed over to Maui. So
that's super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, just from my few times that I got to play against a Division I team, it's so much longer that you almost like dry off. You know what I mean? Like you go from being hot and sweaty to like cooling down, and like you're like, I need to get up and start moving around again.
Yeah, very fine line though, because always the first game when we play, our guys hop up like normal time in their head. You kind of get it down. We've already had a couple D2 games this year, and now we're playing D1. And they're up there standing for like 2.5 minutes, just standing at half court. And it's like, well, by the time we have the next media, man, the other assistants are like, you guys are staying on this bench for a little bit. First off, it looks ridiculous. Second off, it's like, I don't know. It's kind of like getting too amped up too early. So there's a fine line, but I understand too, like guys probably feel like they're getting cold.
Yeah. Is there a certain time that they're going on those TV timeouts? I don't even know.
I don't know exactly what it is, but yeah, there is. They blow the buzzer. That gives you, I think, 10 seconds before, 15 seconds before they're going to inbound the ball. But yeah, so that's the biggest difference. But let's just say for D2, since that's what we do most often, the biggest emphasis is like, and something I didn't think about when I got into coaching is it's like, huddles kind of play themselves out. As a player, I think you think they kind of play themselves out, but I think it's important as a staff to like go through, hey, how we want to do this, who we want talking when, if we want to, there's different styles. I mean, I've been in huddles where only the head coach talks. There's ones where it's joint effort. There's ones where the guys talk a lot, but being efficient and knowing what you're doing, like having the same kind of plan, yeah, things are going to get thrown different directions. You got to be adjustable, but at the same time, being efficient and having a plan, I think is important. So
do you meet as a staff before you get to the players?
Yep. So that's how we start. So we manager brings out the stool. I'm going to say these are all media, so we're sitting. Manager brings out the stool, puts the stool down. Guys that are in the game go sit on the bench. For us, they can sit wherever. At Long Beach State, they had to sit in order of position. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the coaches meet in the back. Coaches meet in the back and talk about adjustments, talk about what we're seeing, talk about what we want. Like more or less it's the assistants in the coach's ear saying, hey, we should try this, we should try this. And then he's thinking about it, and then he's going to take what he wants and goes and tells it back to the team. Now, the biggest adjustment since I've been doing the defense, for us at least, it's different for everybody, of course, how they do this, but he kind of wants me to go first. So Coach and Coach Dantley go back, and they stand in the back and talk about the offense, talk about what they're seeing. And I immediately, guys sit down, and I just go over what just happened defensively and what we're going to be in next. Because we switch defenses so much. I mean, we're switching live ball action, like we're calling different stuff defensively and switching. So anytime we more or less switch defense every time out of a huddle, like it's not the exact same thing, whether it's ball screen coverage, press or not press, doubling the post or not doubling the post, things like that. So establishing what we're in real quickly, how we're just doing what we need to do better, fast. And then I walk back to the head coach. They give me the rundown of what they're about, like what they're thinking now. And then he heads up, talks to the guys. He takes his time talking to the guys. And that the best part about, I think, having the coaches go and do that is it gives the players time to sit down, take a deep breath, and talk to each other if they want to. Instead of like the head coach getting in there right away. And now you got guys like are bickering with each other or like trying to talk about certain things, and you got a coach trying to yell at them and wants attention. Like, you've been in those huddles before where it's like coaches have got to tell a guy to like pipe down or something like that.
Yeah, for
sure. I don't think that happens if you kind of set up your huddle that way. You just give like designated times for when the opportunity is there for like the guys to talk and the assistant coaches talk and the head coach to talk. It's different for every program, but that's kind of how we do it. The assistants at that point, when the head coach is talking, get up with the GAs or the managers or the red shirts, whoever you have that's charting stuff that's important to your team. For us, it's kills. Trying to figure out how many kills we have, 3 stops in a row. Then once coach is done with the guys and they're getting up to break, throwing those little tidbits in there like, hey, we've got 3 kills. We got to get 4 more this half or whatever. Offensive rebound, we're getting out offensive rebound. Stats like those, things that are important to your program. Getting up with your GAs and the people who are charting that during that time. And then us checking the box scores and making sure we have the fouls right, the timeouts right, all that stuff right, just in case. But that's kind of the order, typical order for a Chaminade immediate timeout. Now, in Maui, like I was saying, you got all that time, man. You got to you got a lot more time. So usually how we do in Maui is I'll go back, talk with the coaches first, and then we'll all come up. Coach will go over all the stuff he wants to go through. And then we still have time after that for me to put the defensive adjustments in for coming out of that media. We don't have that time with D2. The D2 huddles seem like they go quick, man.
Yeah.
Especially when you got more than one coach talking. That's why you got to know. And I've been on teams where only the head coach talks, and that's absolutely fine too. It's different ways of doing things. It's however you want it done. But he wants me to make the defensive adjustments in the huddle as much as possible rather than having to try and do them on the fly, because then like one guy misses one and everybody's on a different note. So you can hold guys accountable. When you said something in a huddle, you better know what we're in. Sometimes it gets a little gray area when you're calling things on the run, like in defensive transition or off a make or a dead ball. So he wants me to do that in our huddle. But yeah, that's kind of the way we do it.
That's awesome. I think like you said, it is different in every program. I'm lucky to be working for an awesome head coach that gives me a lot of say. Not only me, but the whole staff. We meet, every time we have a full timeout or media, we're meeting as a staff before we get to the players, like you just said. And I think it's important that the players have that opportunity to talk amongst themselves and figure things out, because, at the end of the day, they're the ones on the court. And so, that having some leaders step up and voice their opinion and what needs to be said gets said before the coaches get there, I think is really important. Christina Williams, the head coach at Lewis and Clark, really does a great job of taking insight from every coach on our staff, top to bottom. And she does a good job of letting me speak in timeouts. So I'll try to find my little point where she has a break in her sentence and I can get in my little, 0.2 second spiel, and then she'll go back to talking. And, as an assistant, that's an art. You got to really time it. I wasn't very good at it my first year. But last year I got better. I could figure out when she was going to take a breath and I could throw in 2 cents and then back out. And she, every once in a while too, she'll just say, hey, you run it. You go sit down, take the board. Yeah. And with that being said, I think as an assistant, you have to be ready for those opportunities. And you almost have to think the whole game as if you are the head coach. So you need to be making decisions in your head the whole game, even if you're not voicing it, because you need to be ready for when you're asked to voice it. Have you found that to be the case as an assistant at Chaminade, that, you've been thrown in situations where you need to make the call?
Yeah. Especially when the defense, you can get told the defense is turned over to you, but until you're in the position where you're actually making defensive calls early on in the season, like in the last 2 minutes of a game kind of decisions in the huddle, when the head coach turns to you and tells you to make that call, then it's like, okay, I'm actually running the defense. And you thought, because you just kind of assume it's going to go back to the head coach and that, but I guess that just means he feels comfortable with the staff, which is great and fantastic, great opportunity. But I still have nightmares of early games with those opportunities this year. In Maui, Anthony Edwards hitting that game winner at the end. I wish we would have ran another guy at him, and that was on me. And I said, no, we're going to stay unless they set an on ball, and they didn't set the on ball. So, and we didn't, and he hit a 3-4 feet behind the 3-point line. But so you could look at that either way. But that was an early reminder, I guess an early exclamation point to, hey, you got to be ready for these things, because it's not going to revert back to what it was. This is the way it is looking now. You're going to have to make those calls. So yeah, I totally understand. I think the point you made that was so big is thinking through it in your head the entire time. But even you're but maybe you're not voicing it. Well, I think it's almost better that you're, until asked in a lot of situations, not voicing it. okay, like they know, they see it too. And like, yeah, you're throwing little subtle, like, okay, but shoot, you might not agree with exactly what's going on the floor, and that's going to happen sometimes, and that's okay. But like you said, when you're asked, that's when it matters, and you gotta come up to bat ready to swing and help the team out with what you got. So I totally agree. You got to be thinking through it the whole time. I haven't, like we've talked about before, I don't, in-game offensive adjustment stuff is not what I'm doing for us. And that's all credit to Coach Bavard. He's a savant. And then Coach Dantley was in that system and played in it and everything too. So when he's got little offensive things, he's like, Dan, what are you seeing for this? And then it's kind of me on the defensive side. So we've kind of got it a nice setup for what we got going right now.
And, you know, I've only been a head coach at the high school level and AAU level, so I haven't done this in college yet. But I always loved calling timeouts after we would score a bucket, in AAU especially, because it gave us a chance to change our defense, like you were just saying. It gave our players a little bit of a high coming into the timeout when I'm talking to them. And so, you know, they're feeling good about themselves. And I think it allowed us to re-navigate like what we want to do strategy wise. But my least favorite time to call a timeout was after the other team scored, because they got to set up a press or a new defense, and whatever I'm probably drawing up during that timeout may go out the window.
Yeah.
Is
That's
there
the
any
right there?
Yeah.
Bob hates. He's just like, play through that, man. You guys are gonna learn. They're gonna change what they're doing if we call it right here. Like, figure it out.
Yeah. So is there any tweak to that in your mind? Do you have situations that you like or dislike?
Yeah. Well, the biggest one, all depending on personnel. I always go back to depending on personnel and how much you trust your guys, honestly. But the biggest one that I don't like calling a timeout is, especially if down one or tied, coming off a missed shot, defensive rebound, you got 7 seconds left and you got the ball in your hands of your playmaking guard.
The last dance.
Yeah, let that man go.
Michael Jordan.
Yeah. And when Chaminade's that's an Eric Bavard special. Like, he has such a good feel for when to let go and when to call timeout. I don't think I'd be ready to the point of where he is. I think he's elite at it, of knowing like the flow of the game, how that guy's been playing, and you got to make that quick. That's the quickest decision you got to make, probably anything in basketball, whether you're going to call that or not. But I mean, if you got the guys, I like not calling it if you feel comfortable, and that's all depending how the game's going too. Like, if the game's been going like really poor, like you were up 10 and now all of a sudden you're down in that guard and your playmaking guards have coughed the ball up a couple times, and you haven't been making many plays, and they just came on a big comeback. Yeah, maybe, okay, we're calling a timeout, we're setting something up, drawing something up, kind of putting it more in the coach's hands. But shoot, if we just came back and we pushed back, and we've had this scenario a couple times at Azusa Pacific 2 years ago. We had a guy, we didn't call a timeout, and Grant Dressler pulled up from like 5 feet behind us. It was probably not a good shot, but pulled up from like 3 feet behind the three-point line, just drained it. We won the game at their place. Also on the road, I think on the road, not calling timeouts at the end of games is much bigger, giving opportunity to fans for get more even jacked up and get louder, for a home team to set their defense. I think on the road, almost I'd put it like 75% of the time in those situations, I wouldn't like to call a timeout if you got the proper personnel.
It's such a bang decision, you know, unless you've gone through this thinking prior and you know what you're going to do. But if you're going off feel, it's such a split second decision.
Yeah, I think it's just years and years of doing it and spending time thinking about it. And that's something that I've been trying to take advantage of, even like this quarantine time right now. It's just sitting down and breaking down stuff like that. Like, how would I do it? Like,
yeah.
Knowing that I don't have that responsibility yet, but someday I'd love to have it. So how would I do it to start getting ready? So that's the one where I'd say not calling it. Calling a timeout, yeah, just being this isn't as much putting on my head coaching cap, but being the defensive guy, times where I think we can switch our defense and kind of adjust what they're doing, whether that's after a run on their part or shoot, we're on a run at our end too. Same thing. Like, all right, hey, that was great. Now they're going to adjust this way. Let's come back with this other and it's nice when you have a defense that's super flexible and can do a lot of different things. And when you can switch on balls, when you can double, when you can not double, when you can press, when you can not press. We had a team like that last year, but there's been other years where it's like, it's a little bit more, this is what we do defensively. And there's little tweaks, but not full changes. So I don't think calling timeouts in those situations as much. I think that just gives more an advantage to the offense. So it's all dictated back to personnel for me.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think it's also dependent on the level of your coaching, which goes back to personnel. What's your philosophy, or even like, what do you guys do at Chaminade when it comes to drawing up new plays versus using plays that the guys already know in timeouts? Do you guys mix it up and do a little bit of brand new stuff in those timeouts, or is it always stuff that they know?
Anytime throughout the game?
Yeah, let's go. Let's start there. Anytime throughout the game.
I would say it's probably in the first half, it's usually always stuff we know. Second half, we go into halftime. We kind of think about some like, man, like we really have an advantage in this matchup that we didn't know might have been the matchup at the start of the game. But a guy for them has 2 fouls, or a guy for them has 2 fouls, and we want to pick up a foul in the first minute. Okay, here's the adjustment to this play. Like usually this is, we're running this flare, but now we're going to fake the flare and we're going to dive that screener and try and pick up a foul on that big break. So second half is kind of when small adjustments. More credit to Coach Bavard, but I mean he's the master at drawing stuff up at the end of the games that are things that we've never run in practice. Like we just haven't done them. Now they're actions that we've run in practice, but they're not exact plays. And that's usually, I'm talking half court stuff, half court sets and stuff like that. Full court, we got a lot of like, okay, there's 4 seconds left. We use this kind of play. There's different actions out of it, different reads you can make now. But this is the same kind of flow of what happens. All right, we got 7 seconds. We have this one that we usually call. And now he'll be like, okay, well, this is what's going to be open probably. If like read 1 and then read 2 here if that's not open. So a little bit of both. Early in the game, more stuff that we have actually had planned, and then as we go throughout the game and make little adjustments, and then at the end of the game, shoot, when you got a coach like Coach Bavard who's so good at that offensively, like he'll just draw something up that half the time I don't know he's had it in his back pocket forever, or if he's literally just spitballing. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you.
I think it goes back to IQ of the players again, or the level of the players. If you have players that don't have a huge basketball IQ, drawing stuff up on the fly is going to be tough. But if you have some really high level players, high IQ players, I think you can do that, pretty successfully. Just a random question. Do you guys have like a book of plays like laminated that you pull out during games, or is it all drawing up?
No, our head coach has us assistants give him a play card, and we actually did that at Long Beach State. I don't think Coach used to do that. I think he used to just try to keep them all in his mental. But over the years, like there's more and more, and things open up. Or some years we can run more, like you said. It depends on our personnel. We have years where we can run a lot of stuff if we want to. We have years where we can't run a lot of stuff. Where it's more because our whole offense is read based. Everything's read based, so we really don't have that many sets. But the farther the year gets along, if you got a team with a high IQ, we add them throughout the year, like weekly. And then that's when we start making him that play card. He'll have it on him in his pocket. He doesn't like having his plays all down in a binder and everything. I think he's a little superstitious. They're going to get taken or whatever.
Yeah,
but yeah, we give him a little play card and he has that.
Got you. One thing that I was thinking about when thinking about timeouts is I feel like it's a similar conversation on whether you use timeouts or conserve them for the end of games. Mm-hmm. That's the same conversation as if you play a guy or girl with that's in foul trouble through that foul trouble, or if you save them for the end of the game. And to me, they're pretty similar. And I find myself being in the camp of use the timeouts or the player in foul trouble when you need it. And if they're gone at the end of the game, they're gone at the end of the game from my level. Yeah. I think if I was like an NBA coach, I think conserving the timeouts is much more valuable.
Yeah.
But yeah, at my level, I see too often there are games where someone sits for like 8 to 10 minutes because they're in foul trouble, and the game goes out of whack to the point where they can't even come back. Or coaches will want to save their timeouts for the last couple of minutes of the game, and the game gets out of whack too far to where those timeouts mean nothing by the time they get to them. Yeah. And so I'm on the side of like, use it when needed at my level. Do you have an opinion on either of those topics?
Players wise, I think we kind of touched on this last time we talked too, but I think it depends on the player's game and stuff. Like we had a point guard last year where it's, man, we really want to play him right here, but there's a good chance he could pick up an offensive foul in this. So we got to sit him a little bit longer, but then get him on as soon as we can because he's so valuable. So player wise, I'm with you. Like, it'll get out of hand quickly if you don't play him. You got to talk to him and be like, hey, like, you cannot lose your aggressive way of playing, of course, because there's nothing worse than putting a guy in there and he just doesn't want to foul, so he just completely bails out on everything, offensively and defensively. I'd rather have the next guy up than that guy if that's the case. Give somebody else an opportunity who's going to go full out and everything like that. So it's a very fine line. Timeout wise, I've always been the exact same. Like, let's use them. I think I need to tone it back like, I'll be in coach's ear, like, call timeout, coach, like
yeah.
I feel like, and he's done it before and he's called them, and then we get to the end of the game, it's like, damn, I was like, why was I telling him that? Like, we could use just 130 right now, like having that 30.
Right.
So I think that's something I need to get better at. Even if I think we should call the timeout, if he's not calling it, knowing there's probably a reason that he knows a lot better than I do, and I need to just shut up and we'll have that thing hopefully in the end. So timeouts is a little bit tougher because I'm with you, man. It's like, shoot, call this thing now while there's a run, or we know we can hop on them if we call this thing and set up this new defense. They're not ready for it or whatever. I want to use them, and I think using them early is very beneficial. But I'm probably talking a lot off of what our experiences were this year, and we had a lot of close losses, the most that I've ever had in my career, and it was really tough. And having one more timeout at the end would have been really nice. And also having guys that weren't fouled out would have been really nice. That one kid I was talking about, and other things too. So it's always second guessing yourself. You're never going to be perfect, but that's kind of where I go with that.
Yeah, I guess I'm just kind of, and this is probably like how I am in life in general, is like, I don't want to get to the finish line and have these timeouts or this player that's well rested and didn't end up fouling out for no reason. You know what I mean? It's like, and I'll probably watch this in 10 years and be like, yeah, you're so young and naive. But I don't know. I just see the mistake too often of coaches saving timeouts for the last couple of minutes and then not even end up using them when it would have been helpful to use it at the 4, 5, 6 minute mark. One thing that I was thinking about when preparing for this was, you know, there are ways that you can use a timeout without actually calling a timeout. And a couple situations I thought of, and this isn't really a question, but more just for maybe a young coach or someone that's just getting into the game. But if you want to get the same effects of a timeout without having to burn one, you know, during a free throw, call over four players from your team and tell them to sprint over to you and get the information that you would pass along in a 30, and then have them run back and tell the shooter or, you know, the other person what information you want done. The other way that you can do it is sub in 5 new players that you've been talking to on the bench with the X's and O's that you want done. And then the last one, and this is more at the AAU level and high school level, but just yell onto the court exactly what you want done, because the other players in a loud environment especially are unlikely to hear that in a split second and be able to make a change that is that important. I think at the high school and AAU level, that they're not so much thinking about the opposing coach.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are 3 strategies that I've used over the years in the high school and AAU level that I've found helpful to save timeouts.
Pulling the guys off the free throw line, we do that all the time, or I do that all the time, because you only can really do it when you're shooting the free throw. But setting up your defense, I mean, it's so easy that way. You don't have to use a timeout. And like I said, coach always wants me to try and get that to them in like a dead ball or timeout setting rather than on the fly. Because on the fly, it's like, man, you're banking on everyone checks over to you real quick. I'm throwing up a hand signal, or
Yeah.
I'm just screaming on the floor, hopefully over the fans. But it's tough.
Yeah, that is tough. Do you guys have signals? Like, is there hand stuff for most of what you do?
For defensive coverages, yes. Now we've got vocal signals for them too, and everything flips constantly. We have to throughout the year. But for defensive stuff, yes. Baseline and sideline out of bounds, yes. And for the offense, a couple of them, but not most of them. Most of them are verbal. There's a lot of really good coaches in our conference that scout so much film, and
Yeah.
I mean, we pride ourselves on doing the same. That, I mean, we got binders of other teams, like every call we've gotten from the year, and then we go back through the binders from the past 4 or 5 years of the same head coach and stuff like that. So trying to get everything off camera. Hand signals can kind of put stuff on the film. You can't hear unless you know where the mics are in the gym. If the mic's right on the scorer's table, you can't hear. So vocally, we try to do a lot more vocally, and we're not high majors with 35,000 people in the stands. So you can do it vocally and get away with it. I know they have a tough time with that at that level, like in between, because you can't call with your hands really, because it gets picked up, and you can't yell it over people. So it's kind of more like almost like football game planning, where it's, the guys know going into it, like what they're going to be in at this time. And then also using their media timeouts efficiently and getting all that information out, because they've got so many factors and stuff getting picked up on film for them.
Yeah, I think it's important for anything that we're saying right now to recognize that we're talking mostly about our level and our specific situation. I think it changes at every level and every situation that you're in, but we can only speak for what we're doing currently, or what we've done in the past. Are there any coaches in your league or that you look to get sets out of timeouts, or just have you learned from watching a coach on how they perform in timeouts or out of timeouts? I have a couple in mind that I've faced when I was coaching at Ari Long High School back in Longview, Washington. During the summer league, I got to coach against some of the varsity coaches. I was just a JV head coach, but we would sometimes play against other varsities just in pickup games or whatever. Mm-hmm. And Joe Kinch at Kelso High School, who's a legendary coach in that area, he was really good at out of timeouts of throwing one-off defenses that you would just see once, and it would be a crazy trap or something that you couldn't really prepare for, because it would set up like the same look as everything else, and then out of the first pass, every single option is covered. Another person that comes to mind is Brad Stevens. I love watching him on YouTube out of timeouts. I think he just has some really crazy X's and O's. And the last one is Mike Meek, who was coaching at George Fox, and then just recently took the U of P job and is crushing it there already in his first year. And he's really good out of timeouts. Sets, offensive sets is what I'm mostly thinking about. But those are 3 coaches that come to mind that are really good out of timeouts. Do you have any in mind for your league? Or
the ones that I watch for our league, I mean, there's a lot of good ones in our league.
Yeah.
And I watch them more for the scouting purposes. And my storing some of their plays away for later down the line myself too, not only for scouting. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's all basketball is just stealing.
Honestly, it's a fact. And I like to credit people for that when I get the chance, but that's kind of a down the road thing where you get to credit them for it. But either way, Brad Stevens was going to be my one for like ATO stuff, like sideline out of bounds, baseline out of bounds. And a lot of coaches in our conference, we saw a couple plays this year, and one of them hit a game winner on us with a Brad Stevens set that he used at Butler in that Final Four, I think it was. So that was tough, seeing that play and being like, I know exactly what that is. I had no idea it was coming. Yeah, so that was tough. But Brad Stevens there. And then kind of for like the thing we were talking about earlier, just like huddle setup and who's talking and stuff like Popovich. He gets back and he talks to when he had Ime on his staff and everything. And sometimes when they'd have the mics on them or they all, they like mic and pop up because he's going to come with something crazy or whatever. But the coaches go back and talk. And I mean, that is the definition of players taking the time right there to sit down, get water, break it down between when they had Manu and Tony and Tim, like the amount of communication and shoot, they'd even be pulling out the whiteboard and drawing and showing each other the stuff in the huddle right there and taking that time. And Pop would just come back and sit on the stool and there'd be like, you can find some of this on YouTube too. There's huddles where he doesn't even say a word, just sits there and just lets them go. He has such a good mind for the moment. Like, hey, I don't need, or they come back and they're flustered and things are going wrong. And yeah, maybe they're not running the plays right, but, or running the defense exactly how they want to be guarding ball screens. But he knows that they know that. And he's not like berating them. Like, no, this is what we're supposed to be doing. He's just like, all right, can calm down and figuring out like more just trying to connect to them in that huddle rather than like get on their heads about things they already know they're just not doing right. And they probably already just talked about for the last minute 30 when you're standing with your assistants, another 10 feet behind the huddle. Like those guys are the best of the best clearly, and they're going through it. So just him having a feel for the huddle and knowing what needs to happen. I like following Pop on that.
Yeah, he's amazing. I think Steve Kerr is kind of following in line with what Pop did or does. Another one that comes to mind, and this is just more of like, it's random, but Eric Bridgeland, who was at Whitman and now at Redlands.
Yep. Redlands.
Okay, I was blanking for a second. He does something cool with his players where they go like arm in arm and like almost like create like a, like a lock to arm. I don't even know what you would call it, like a huddle behind the coach and then the players. Everyone just is very locked in their huddles. I've never, I don't know what he's saying in there, but as far as just the formation of it, I really like that. And I think it's important for the team to just be dialed in on those moments.
That's like the one last thing I actually had for you on some of this too is just a little side note that we try to do, but I do not do a good enough job at holding guys accountable on it. But at the high levels, they do it so well, like in Maui and all. It's easier when you have a big team and a lot of staff members to do this. But putting all your reserve players, red shirts, GAs, managers, everything on the side of the huddle on this side, wrapped around like closest to the other bench, so they can't see who's on. They got me in Maui running around like the half court line, trying to duck in between 7-footers to see who's sitting right there to get our matchups before we get out. It's important.
Yeah.
If not, I can't see it. They get out of the huddle, and I'm just calling it out on the fly now right before the ball goes in on whose matchups are who. It's a big thing, and it's a very little thing. It also, it's like, yeah, you're tight, kind of same thing, Bridgeland. Like everybody's close together, but there's a purpose. Like everything has a purpose, and it's a small detail, but it all those small details add up, man. And they frustrate coaches, and they make other coaches happy when they don't know who's in the game and what the matchups are, and you're trying to do it on the fly rather than you just had this minute 45 timeout that you could set all this, and now instead it's like your guys are walking out, the ball's getting inbound, and you're yelling different directions, just scattered. So a little thing, but I think it's important.
I've never thought of that. That's something that at our level we don't deal with, where there's a million, people on the court. It's you got your players and maybe a few staff members, but those matchups are very important, especially at the end of games or in tight situations. And that's crazy thinking about that. There are a million GAs and red shirts and people that they can have almost like football block that view from you guys. That's hilarious.
When I was a GA at Long Beach, they were having my 6'8" self stand on that side and take as much room as possible. Like they told us that from day one. Like, you guys stand over here. We had our charts and stuff like that, the kills and everything like that. The assistants would ask for those. We hand it to them, but we're not moving. We're blocking that point of view right there. So that's the thing.
There's something I'm curious if you know the answer to, and I have an idea, but why do some coaches have their timeouts on the court with their own setup chairs versus
Yeah.
back? Do you know?
Yeah. At the high major level, I mean, everybody does it in Maui. Actually, in Maui, they've got a little bit more room. Some of those teams don't, but most teams do. I mean, like Oregon does it every time, and all the managers whip them out. Duke does. Um, it's the crowd noise right behind them. It's the crowd noise right behind them. There might be some more things too, like having microphones or cameras or stuff like around.
Yeah.
The one thing that I mean, we're nowhere near that level where we do that. We bring out a stool for our coach and everything like that every time, but our guys sit on the bench. But yeah, I think it's kind of more like a separate from the outside noise crowd, everybody sit, lock in together kind of thing. It can get pretty hectic with a lot of the times they put the student section right behind the bench areas too. So it can get pretty crazy. I was going to mention though, for us, I forgot where I was going with that.
I'm sure it was going to be great.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Did you have anything else? I know you even came prepared with a note sheet. Was there anything else that you wanted to discuss?
I mean, you hit it, man. It was just like the differences in levels. I didn't want to be saying like this is the way to do it or anything like that, but like the time periods, the amount of time for timeouts, how many timeouts. There's such big differences between D1, D2, D3 for this stuff talking, and then GAs and managers' responsibilities in it, how we set it up as our staff who's talking when and everything like that. But yeah, no, I mean, I just think it's something honestly that has to be efficient, has to have some little bit of planning to it at least. Yeah, things are going to get thrown around in the midst of the game, but having a pattern and just kind of sticking with that and just taking that as a time to regroup and everybody lock in together and figure out what step is next. I think it's really underutilized almost. It's like, okay, I'm going to take this as a time for our guys to get water and our head coach to yell at the players. Well, you can get so much out of timeouts.
So much.
They're so important to the whole flow of the game and everything like that. And I think honestly, that's why D3, I've heard at least, like some coaches want the medias and some don't. Some of those coaches, hey, we want this medias first off to get a break and a breakdown with our guys and kind of come together. And then other coaches like, well, we're playing 12, 13 guys. We don't want you sitting down and taking more breaks like that. We're rotating, we're throwing guys at you. So it's always interesting for me to hear those like debates on back and forth, like different styles and different uses of timeouts and whatnot. So I appreciate you talking about this with me.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. I have one more question for you. And before I get to that, I think it's important to note that the way to get good at running timeouts and the way to learn about timeouts and the way to, just get better as a coach is just through experience. The way that I would handle a timeout my first year out of college, becoming a coach was just, I was just, you don't even really know what you're doing. You're just kind of like in there scrambling. But over the years of just watching great coaches and, being around good leaders, you start to learn like what's important and what isn't important in those valuable seconds. The final question I have for you is, do you guys work on your timeouts in practices, or do you like have quote unquote timeouts, throughout the year during practice?
Yeah. Not to the effect of, like everything, like the coaches meeting behind and not that part. So the times where I can think of where we do, we'll go live, like white group, blue group. Coach will give the white group to me. Coach will give the blue group to Coach Dan. I'm running the defense. They're running the offense. It's like 10 possessions in a row. You like go back and sit down after, and the groups flip more or less. So sitting down there and just being able to break down what we just went through and how we're adjusting next and what's coming next and stuff like that, letting the guys still talk first. But yeah, getting that experience in those situations. So, and then we use, of course, we use all our scrimmages, all our exhibitions. We'll play Kingdom of Hawaii, which is like the pro team, semi-pro team or whatever on the island. And for those exact reasons, like there's nothing worse than you're getting thrown into a game one and your huddle is just a mess. It's all over the place and it. It just feels like, man, we're not ready and prepared for this. So taking any advantages of live times where we can have huddles and shooting referees and get all those little details in, I think is really important. But yeah, our coach has given us good opportunity, me and Coach Stanley, to get some time like sitting down and running those huddles and whatnot. I still think there's a lot for me to learn. Like you said too, when I first got it, it was like trying to just get all these points in, and like less is more almost in a lot of
Mm.
situations, especially as an assistant and right now. But just feeling that out and playing that out, and also hopefully having a head coach that will allow you to feel it out and play it out, and then kind of guide you in the right way if you're doing too much or whatever it is. And I'm very fortunate to have one that's right in that lane. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, man. I've taken a lot of time out of your day, but are you growing out the quarantine beard also?
Oh yeah, I shaved it once when I was flying, actually, because I didn't know if all that stuff was true. If you're flying, you're not supposed to have a beard or whatever. But I didn't know it itched more with my mask. How do you even put a mask on?
Dude, who knows, you know?
You haven't left your house, so it doesn't
No,
matter.
I've put on a mask, but like it sits like, you know,
Yeah.
on 2 inches in front of my face because of my, you know, these
Yeah.
whiskers. But yeah, once
No.
you get past the itchy phase, it's not bad.
Yeah, but that's where I am right now. So I'm like you, man. I'm gonna let this thing flow for a while. Hopefully get to your level.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
Appreciate it, Scott. Thanks.
See you, Kyle.
All right, brother.